Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second PE Talks organized by European Physical Education Association, EUPEA. And this is the second of a series of physical education talks organized by EUPEA, this time titled Meaningful Testing in Physical Education, Overview of Europe. Before we start with the presentation and presenting the main idea of meaningful testing across Europe, I would just like to invite the president of EUPEA, Avelino Azevedo, to welcome you all and to open these PE Talks. So, Avelino, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Billy. My name is Avelino Azevedo. I'm the new president of EUPEA. Just would like to welcome you all to this PE Talk overview. And I think it's very important for us to make and to continue this work that was done before for the PE Talks. So as we have PE in all Europe, but really different realities. And this reflection and this sharing of the overviews is something that we think it's important to continue this work done started by the last meet board of EUPEA. And for us, this meaningful testing in physical education is one of the things that we approached and discussed on our forum last year in Frankfurt. And the conclusions are some of the thoughts that we will share here. And also, because we think that this tool is very important for measuring the health and the fitness and the performance of our students. So before I start, I also, as this is a conclusion of a forum, I also invite you, don't forget also to come to the next forum that will be held in November in Belgrade, and all the informations that we all have for this yearly forum of EUPEA are on our EUPEA website. So thank you very much, and I wish you all a good work. Thank you for the EUPEA team for putting this up. I think it's also very important for us to organize these PE Talks and to continue this work of sharing our views about physical education, and in this case, about the meaningful testing in PE. Thank you. And Biljana, I give the floor back to you.
Thank you, Avelino, for breaking the ice. And now, before we start with the official presentation of what we want to share with you, I would just like to add some technical aspects. So you can all use the subtitles and translation options here at your link. And also, if you have some comments or maybe some questions, please feel to share them in the chat sessions. And our colleagues Viviana and Bruno are here with us to follow this chat session and then to give the floor and to give your questions and comments also to our panelists. And I will just now go with the short introduction of what we have done in Frankfurt during our board meeting, as already Avelino mentioned. So on short, I will just use some seconds to share my screen. Okay, so can you see my screen now?
Yes, it's okay, Biljana.
Yes, it's okay.
Okay, great. So as physical education is different around Europe, and the context of physical education depends quietly a lot from the country perspective, from the policies within the country, the goals depending from the country and their interests and everything. So we have a very different context, but still we have some similarities. The idea of this work of the board members of EUPEA and also all other members of the EUPEA was to identify what we have common and what we have different when it comes to meaningful testing in physical education, and to have the experience and examples from EUPEA member countries. So how do our aim was to identify approaches and practices in meaningful testing in physical education across different European countries, which are members of EUPEA. And we first approached to all representatives of physical education associations, which are EUPEA members. Then from each region, we share the same questions to each members, and then from each region, from each country, we have their summary of their answers and their perspectives. And then this summary across the Europe was presented, as Evelyn already mentioned, during the forum meeting in Frankfurt. So with this, we have some overview overview of what is happening in testing and assessment in physical education across European countries. We asked 4 questions, and they were: do you use testing in your country? What type of tests and batteries of tests you use in your country? What is the purpose of applied tests, and what are results used for? And as I already mentioned, we received quite a lot of different perspectives. So we receive feedback from countries from all regions of EUPEA, which is a Northwest, Central, Central East, Southeast, and Southeast region. And it's more than 30 countries that share their experiences and their perspectives. In terms of time, this is how we summarize everything, but in terms of time, I will not go through this, and you can find all this information per country on the EUPEA website. And I will just give a short overview of what the conclusions were. So following the summary of all the regions, as we said, we have quite different perspectives, which perspectives go in a line with the goals of physical education within each country. So a number of countries, especially the countries in the North region and also including France, use swimming tests as compulsory tests in their physical education practice. Also, another countries, especially the one in Central region, Southeast and South region, use fitness tests and as a tool to evaluate student physical fitness, to design teaching processes, and to identify talented students. And different fitness test batteries are applied. So Finland has its own battery. A lot of countries in the Central West and also Southeast region use feedback or another country-based the batteries. So you can see more about these batteries at the website of EUPEA. And also in some countries, especially in the Center, East and Southeast region, fitness tests are supplemented with anthropometrical tests, and also they're used to follow the health and growth of the students. And but this is not all, because other countries also use a little bit wider perspective of testing and assessment. So, for example, in Ireland, teachers are using pupil self-assessment and peer assessment checklist to identify their movement skills and also to identify the physical literacy of the children. And some countries, for example, like Denmark and Sweden, use written tests to assess mainly health aspects of physical education. What is interesting is that not all the countries has different perspectives, but only in some of the countries we have a country-based test batteries, and in most of them this is not on a state level, but mainly as a practice of physical education teachers. In terms of time, because we have a lot of countries and a lot of different experience, we are not going to go into details, but we are going to define the 2 different aspects when it comes to testing and assessment in physical education. And in this regard, with us here, we have 2 of our board members and also experts of EUPEA, and that are our colleagues Nigel Green and Wouter Cools, and they're going to share their perspectives related to testing and to assessment. Nigel Green is a board member of EUPEA representing UK, and he is vice chair of Northwest Countries Physical Education Association and also a chair of the International Physical Literacy Association. And our colleague Wouter Cools is coming from Belgium, and he is also board member representing the Belgian Physical Education Teacher Association and also EUPEA board member. He's assistant professor at Free University in Brussels and also a lecturer at the University of Applied Science in Ghent. So Nigel and Wouter, welcome to this Talks, and we are looking forward to hear your perspectives and your idea about and your experiences as well about testing and assessment in physical education. So I would first start with the title of what we mentioned, and that's testing, meaningful testing in physical education. But discussing physical education and students' learning, we often use and we often refer to both testing and assessment. So my first question will go to Nigel. And Nigel, can you, at the beginning, can we explain by what means we use assessment and what we mean when we say testing? Can we make differences between these 2 terms, and how are they different or similar to each other?
Yeah, certainly. Good evening, everybody. Nice to be here, and thanks for joining us. From a testing point of view, in physical education, it's often used to measure proficiency, and that can be related to knowledge, skills, or abilities, but there's usually a pass or fail in relation to that. When we're looking at assessment, as ICEP would suggest, assessment's the process by which student learning is interpreted, communicated, and reflected on in relation to learning outcomes. And it's this process of gaining an insight into what our pupils know, understand, and can do as a result of us teaching them through physical education. Now, from an assessment point of view, this can be based on a formative assessment, which is usually an ongoing assessment during the teaching period of time, or a summative assessment, which is usually takes place at the end of a particular interval. Additionally, the assessments can be norm referenced, and that's where you compare one to another. There can be criteria reference, where you compare against a particular criteria, or ipsative, where you're comparing progress from one point to another. Thanks, Biljana.
Thank you. So I think that we made a clear differentiation here between testing and assessment, and I hope that this is going to be even clearer when we discuss further on. So when we speak about physical education, changes in movement behavior and motor skills are crucial for physical education. So in this regard, Wouter, could you please give your stand or your opinion about why testing motor skills is important or is needed? You can just please use your microphone because you're muted.
So thank you, Biljana, and welcome everyone from my part as well to this webinar. If we're looking at testing / assessment in physical education, as Nigel also already mentioned, it has different perspectives, and if we look at testing, and I think then testing is important because sometimes we need to make decisions on physical education, and it's on the large population of a region. And then we can, for example, when we want to set new educational goals, or when children are suspected to have developmental delays, and maybe additional testing is necessary to really see what's going on. If we want to get an idea of whether a population masters certain motor skills and to what extent they master them, so then testing is appropriate. Some examples where testing might also be appropriate is when we're talking about this kind of skills that we really want children to have achieved, and if we want to get informed in how many children have achieved this level of proficiency, for example, as Nigel already mentioned. And I'm thinking about some people call it swimming skills, or I rather call it aquatic skill level. If we want to have our children have reached at a certain age a certain level of swimming skills or aquatic readiness skills, so that they can move around and in water safely. So then testing might be appropriate to see how many children have reached this level, and how many children we can have them safe in and around water. The same thing goes for cycling skills, for example. This is something that a lot of schools still want to have a certain test, whether there is a certain level of proficiency in cycling to be able to go outside the walls of the school, for example. On the other hand, if we want to have an idea on object control, balance, and locomotor ability of children in general, to see whether a population has developed well or is a little bit behind in proficiency level, then we can use some testings, and then we are to be informed. But then it's not this kind of testing and this kind of data collection is not in function of the direct relation between the teacher and the student. It's more like a general idea of populations that we want to have. So that is what I think, why testing is important, but maybe it's not the role of the physical educator always to gather this data. If we are talking about assessment, then we would rather see the physical education teacher use this uses assessment or testing in this way that it relates to the learning process of a pupil, or and so it can be used to guide and to help a child develop further in his general development.
Thank you, Wouter. Thank you for sharing this perspective about the importance of using motor tests. And as you mentioned, we need them to identify the level of skills, to identify the level of progress, to see the changes that are happening following the physical education program. But physical education encompasses more than just skills development. And it also reflects changes in cognitive and socio-emotional aspects, impacting overall personality and well-being. And having this in mind, Nigel, what do you think and what do you believe are the different aspects of assessment in physical education?
Yeah, I'm glad you sort of picked up on that, Biljana, because I think this sort of highlights the subtle differences between the aims of physical education in different European countries. I think testing can be used in certain circumstances, but if we're looking at holistic progression in physical education, and that's what we're after developing the child through physical education, then we need to consider not only their physical competence, but also their confidence, their motivation, their knowledge and understanding, and potentially their social skills as well, because we're looking to develop children in a fully rounded method, and we're not focusing specifically on actual motor skills. Motor skills are a part of that, but we're after this more holistic development. And that should include then the strategies that we use, which obviously need to be inclusive. For example, if we're giving every child in the class the same test, then that's going to be exclusive, because as we know, within a class, you're going to get a normal distribution with most classes. And so if the test is sort of set at the middle of the class, then the ones who are perhaps more able will find it too easy. The ones who are less able will find it too challenging and potentially fail. And therefore, we need to think of it from an assessment point of view, a reflection point of view, to help learning and the progress of learning. And this is why I think we need to think about the sort of strategies that we're using from an assessment point of view. Something I would suggest is the use of authentic core tasks. Now, a core task is an activity you can provide for a group that can consider the holistic development of a group of children. So, for example, if you were working on a module on dance and you've got this group of grade 8 students, you could provide them with an initial task at the start of that unit of work. And that would be for them to create, let's say, a partner dance related to a certain type of music, depending on what you were working on developing. And you would perhaps have certain criteria that they would have to include within that dance. The children could then work on that, and they could work on developing that. And as a teacher, you can then stand back and observe. And by standing back and observing, that allows you to get an overall assessment of where those children are at. And that's not just from a physical point of view, but it's a cognitive, how to think and link the dances or the movements together. It's that social interaction point of view, how they communicate. It's that leadership and teamwork. And it's how motivated they are to get the dance done and how confident they are in actual perhaps performing at the end. And that teacher just steps back and observes. And that observation then provides that assessment effectively, because you can get that overview of that class without actually providing a specific test of the particular motor skills. And that overview then allows you to consider what you need to plan for your future lessons to enable everybody within that class to move forwards. Because our focus is that development, that challenge, that progression through physical education. So I'll leave it at that and let you pick up something else there.
Great, thank you, Nigel. And these two perspectives are clearly in line with what the goals of physical education in different countries across Europe are. And that's why we might have so many differences among the countries in their approaches in testing and assessment as well. But we definitely could combine all these approaches depending on what we want to achieve and how we want to move the physical education forward, depending from the country goal. But keep in mind these perspectives for testing and for assessment and what we have discussed so far. So what do you think that the testing and assessment should be and should not be? So the question is for both Nigel and Wouter. So what are your perspectives on this? What should we pay attention on?
I can jump in there because I've just seen someone from I think it's Malta who said they're thinking of introducing fitness tests. Now, fitness tests are very contentious. Certainly in the UK, particularly in England, we wouldn't be advising this. And now I know in other countries it's quite a popular way of finding out where children are at from a fitness point of view. And I know, having worked in India, it's something the Indian government at one stage were quite keen to do for the children in India. But you have to question why they're doing it. If they're just doing it as a one-off test, then what are they gaining from that? What are they learning from that? And what are the children getting from it? Because often in a fitness test, you are observed or put into a quite potentially embarrassing situation where if you're asked to do a certain number of press-ups and you can't do one, you don't feel very good about that. If you're doing a bleep test, for example, and you drop out early, you won't feel good about that. So fitness tests can have quite a negative effect. Also within the UK, there have been a number of situations where children have unfortunately died from doing multi-stage fitness tests because basically the children weren't prepared for the test. They just did it as a one-off. So I think a test, if it's ever used, needs to be part of learning. Now, we would encourage learning about fitness within physical education, and there could be places to have certain tests and then a time to work and try and develop and learn about fitness and different types of training, and then perhaps retest at different stages. Tests to use in that way for a learning point of view, then that's absolutely fine. But just to have a test for the sake of having a test, just to say in our schools we have 500 people who have got this level and 200 of that level, then I'm sorry, but it's not something we should be doing in physical education. I'll pass that over to Wouter and see where we get to.
Okay, thank you, Wouter. What's yours?
Thank you, Nigel. I agree with what Nigel said before. I think, well, it can be very dangerous to have children being tested with one test at the same time and all the children the same test, because as Nigel mentioned, the danger is that some children, they are able to perform some submaximal testing, and it's one test after one another, and if they are not well prepared, it can be dangerous for certain children. Nigel mentioned the bleep test. if some of the pupils have these high heart rates, it's just not. It's just dangerous to have them to do the bleep test, and then at least you have to give them the choice between a walking test and a running test, so that they are aware which one to choose in relation to their heart rate, for example. This is one of the examples that we have to be very careful with testing, with really physical testing in physical education, because not all children's bodies are still well enough developed to be tested just out of the blue. So preparation is a very important thing. So there should be some period of preparation, training, and so on. So this is what I wanted to add to Nigel's comments. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. So if we can conclude is that the testing can be applied for evaluating the learning, the development, motivation, and follow the effects of teaching process. But also we should be careful in choosing the tests, applying tests, and also adjusting this to the level of the fitness of the children as well. And then also to know why to know the clear goal, why we are using these tests. And this should be clear also for the children and also for the teachers as well. And maybe here at this point, we can make a short break in terms of going to our colleagues, Viviana and Bruno, to see, do we have some questions or comments in the chat? So Viviana and Bruno, do we have something to add here? Do we have some questions from our...
Yes, if I can speak.
Yes.
There is Andrew Desalis that is telling that they are going to introduce fitness testing in Maltese school in October. And is asking, could you please confirm if you usually request medical clearance before such test?
I think, Andrew, this is what I picked up, and you've answered. Thank you. I perfectly agree with the one-off testing. We would, well, I would certainly work against fitness testing unless it's part of a planned program of learning about fitness. So if you're looking to do a module, let's say of 12 weeks, and you're looking to help the children understand about fitness training in relation to different activities and different types of fitness, and you do a progressive movement forwards in their learning, and have little tests at time to show them how it can be tested and how they can then train and then retest, that's part of the learning. But actually just to test people at a given point just for the sake of testing, then we shouldn't be doing it. And I would encourage, is it Andrew, I think? Yeah, I would encourage Andrew to suggest to his school that they don't do that. And in fact, just coming back to what I said earlier about having authentic core tasks, I think what we need to do is we need to think what authentic core tasks would be appropriate for the particular activities that we're going to do. And again, I gave you a short example of a dance core task. And again, if you think about basketball, and you've got a class at the start of a new term, or you've just picked up this class for a new year, you may be aware of what they've done before. You might not have taught them before. So what do? Do you just start teaching them? First lesson is basketball, so I'm going to teach dribbling. Everybody does dribbling. Well, and the second lesson is going to be shooting, and that's, you follow that progression. Or do you use assessment and the core tasks to subtly consider where they're at? So again, for basketball, you could quite simply say to the children, with a partner, I want you to make up a routine that demonstrates to me the range of skills you've got. And that could include dribbling, shooting, passing, and so on. I then want you to make up a little game in a group of 4, and you can decide on the rules and where you play it and how you play it. And then I want you to sort of reflect on where you're at. And again, by giving those tasks to the students, the teacher can step back and observe, and then that informs them, because that assessment not only informs the teacher about their planning and where the children are at, but it allows the children to reflect on where they're at. And that will happen in the lessons that precede that. So either during a lesson as part of a formative assessment, or at the end of a lesson as a summative assessment, that period of time of reflection on the learning outcomes is the assessment that we're looking at, that reflective time.
Great, thank you very much. Viviana, do we have another question or maybe comments that you want to share now?
If we can have another one, there is Idir Abdenor that it says that is asking, don't you think that assessment in physical education is more focused on the outcome, whereas the process is crucial for fostering motor learning? Maybe you already answered this, but...
Wouter, do you want to pick that up, or?
I think that you just already answered this question. Is that we have to focus on how things evolve and how we can use our observations to fortify our PE lessons, and to really to make some crucial choices to see how we can pick up with the developmental needs of our children related to our curricular goals. For example, we can observe this group of basketball that you mentioned before, and if they are not playing together and they're not communicating well, maybe they have the skills, but we have to work on the communication skills of the pupils because we want to have the game working within the group of children, and this can differ between two classes. For example, there is the group dynamic can be that different that you have to make other choices for one group than for another one. The focus is in one group on communication, and maybe in the other group it's really on skill development, because there is big difference. And even within those PE class groups, it can be different for subgroups. And we have to observe and see which pupil needs what, and how we can intervene and provide them opportunities to develop where they are at. So I think that is what we see in the process, and in how we can use assessment to guide the process of the children, the learning process, actually.
Yes, thank you very much. And meanwhile, you can also add your another questions and comments in your chat.
There is another question in the chat from Professor Fernando.
Yes.
He says about research that indicates the better the quality of movement, the better the levels of physical activity and fitness. In this case, wouldn't assessing the quality of movement process measures be sufficient to predict fitness levels? I'm not sure why we need to predict fitness levels. Is that our role as physical education teachers? Or are we looking at that holistic development of individuals? And the other thing is, we may actually be quite competent from a skill point of view. So, for example, in basketball, we might be able to shoot very well, but in actual fact, our fitness might not be that good, even though we can shoot and pass very well. So I'm not sure exactly what you're trying to get at there, Professor Fernando.
Okay, thank you, Andy. And Nigel, you also mentioned the role of physical education teachers in testing and assessment. So we identify why we need testing and what we want to achieve with this. But who should be involved in testing and assessment? Because we know that, for example, implementing some fitness battery in a school, it requires quite a lot of time and a lot of efforts from the physical education teachers, which is also time from teaching in schools. So what do you think, who should be involved in testing and assessment in physical education, and why they should be involved, this or another way?
Yeah, I think what we're looking at here is the influence from some governments. And as I mentioned earlier, the Indian government a few years ago decided that were going to test everyone's fitness in the country. And I said to the schools, well, why are they doing this? And they said, well, we haven't got a clue. I said, well, what are they going to do after they've tested the children, which will probably take a couple of weeks in every school at least. And they said, we've no idea. And there was no indication of why they were actually thinking of testing. So my suggestion was just to give them some information, don't bother testing the children, and see what happens, which is what they did, and nothing happened. So you have to question why we are, or why certain governments are asking for fitness testing. I think that's the first thing. The second thing, who's the assessment for? And as I mentioned earlier, the assessment is mainly for the pupils and the teachers. From the pupils' point of view, giving them a task that allows them to reflect on their progress, using the learner outcomes to allow them to reflect on their progress in lessons, and then over a period of time, allows them then to think of what they want to develop next from a holistic point of view. And that might be to become more confident, to have opportunities for leadership, as well as perhaps develop more knowledge and understanding about particular sports or particular skills in some activities. From the teacher's point of view, you're reflecting on the learning outcomes that you've either agreed with the children or you've shared with the children, and that then allows you to make that progress on, or to consider what to do next. But I actually think the parents are important here. I know in the UK we have a system where we will write reports and we'll have parents' evenings that give you an opportunity to talk to the parents about the progress of their child. And I think joining up that circle of the parents, the children and the teachers is the most important thing if we're going to look at that holistic development. I don't know whether you want to add anything to that, Wouter?
Yes, thank you, Nigel. I completely agree with what you've said before, and I think Garrett made an important comment while we were having our discourse. He said, well, if we want to involve pupils, then we can make use of rubrics so that we actually visualize the learning process for our students with the learning goals, and then see how we can actually divide them up into rubrics where pupils can see where they are at and what the next step in their learning process is. And you can do this for motor skills, but you can also do this for the social and self development skills, as well as for the cognitive elements of physical education.
Yeah, just picking up on that, if that's okay, Biljana.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think having a progressive, developmental, qualitative list of statements in relation to physical, affective, cognitive, social development allows the teacher and the student and the parent to consider where they're currently at and what it is they need to improve at next. And by providing this qualitative criteria, the students have a clear focus and the teachers have a clear focus. And that is therefore inclusive, because we can acknowledge that everyone will be at a slightly different level in their progression and their learning, in their behavior, and therefore everyone has got a slightly different target, and they might be stronger in some activities and more confident in other activities and less so in different activities. And building that whole picture about the child is really important.
Yes, thank you very much. Definitely interesting perspectives and quite broad discussion related to this. And when we are here, it's also important to connect this with practice. So you already mentioned some experience and examples for practice, but can you maybe emphasize some practical examples related to testing and assessment in schools?
So one of the things that I've seen in practice is the use of a sports folio. Is in physical education, but also in sports education. So is actually where students can register their own progress and can monitor, but also can provide different proofs of their activities. And it goes beyond the physical education class itself. Most of the time, they can say how they make the transfer to their home environment and how they relate with physical activities and sports participation in the wider area. So that is what I think can help also to make physical education some kind of sustainable into real lives. So that is a practical example of what I see assessment can be used for in a very holistic approach.
Yes, and definitely something that engage students more into their development. So it will be motivating them for being more active and being more engaged in physical education classes. Nigel, do you might have some examples on your side, or
yeah, absolutely. So something that I've used in schools, and I know people who I've worked with have used in schools, is having effectively a matrix, and within that matrix you have a number of different columns related to specific aspects. And in my case, it's mainly related to the physical, affective and cognitive aspects of development. And then you have progressive qualitative statements going from a very, very simple level that you would expect children who are just entering school would be looking at, gradually moving up towards a level where the qualitative statement would be at a really high level, and one that you would love to have all the children leaving your school achieving that sort of level. Now, what this does, it has clear criteria laid out in relation to physical, affective and cognitive aspects. And the children and the teachers at the end of a unit of work can then indicate where they think they are in relation to the qualitative statements. So for example, if they were doing gymnastics, they could put a little G, and if they were in grade 6, so G6 in each one of the columns in relation to the statements. This means the next time they come back to do gymnastics, they can see where they were previously. But also when they move on to swimming, which is a different activity in the same year, they can chart where they are in relation to swimming. And likewise in athletics, for example, they can chart that. So they can see where they are in relation to a particular activity and how they then can make progress, what their next steps are to focus on for the future. This is something that they can then share with their parents. And so the parents have an idea of where they're up to, and it gives not only themselves, but also the teachers clarity in their work.
Yes, thank you very much, because definitely interesting example how pupils can follow their progress, and also teachers can be engaged in this process, and parents as well. So I would now go back to also you're all invited to share your practices and maybe some positive examples in chat. And I will go now invite again Viviana and Bruno to see whether we have some other questions or maybe some comments related to our discussion so far.
Yes, first of all, I would like to say that we have people from, I think from Taiwan, that we are following our webinar anyway. This Fan Ming Wei was already made some question, but the relator have already answered it. Meanwhile, there is Ioannis from Greece is asking if there is the need to share the result of testing to the parents, or should they be remain private. And David Greshik answer, because there is already some conversation in the chat already going on, And David answer Joannis that the result of the testing should be shared with stakeholders to support the students' development, and use to share with teachers and parents. And what do you agree about? If you agree about this, there should be shared with stakeholders and parents and everybody to support the development, or not?
I'd like to pick this one up because I totally agree with Dave. And it's something I would encourage, because when you talk to the children, you actually find out that a lot of them do physical activity outside of school as well. And it's surprising, as a PE teacher, you don't always know this. I know one year I was really surprised. I found out that one of my children was into canoeing, and he was canoeing at a very high level. And I didn't realize that. You know, I'd taught him for a few years and I didn't realize what he was doing outside school. And this is where the teachers need to get to know their children. If they know the children well, they'll be able to teach them much better. And I would, unfortunately, Yanis, I would disagree. It's not a data protection issue. You're talking to parents, and obviously coaches are keen to help children move forwards and support their personal development, as well as the development through an activity. The more information we can get to teachers about the child, the more we can support them in their learning.
Thank you, Nigel, and thank you everyone for sharing their comments and ideas, because there is a lot of interesting discussions going on in the chat. It's definitely, I think that we discuss different aspects of testing and assessment, that we cannot solve all the issues now, but it's good to think about them and then come back to this again at some point, because this is also a very complex question and we cannot solve everything today. So can we just go with maybe final thoughts from both Nigel and Wouter, and maybe if someone also is having another questions, you're free to share it now in the chat.
Biljana, I've noticed a question from Bruno, which is suggesting that, I'm going to give this to Wouter, which is suggesting that in France there are private companies offering to test students. Now, I'm not sure, I'm presuming that will be fitness testing. Perhaps Bruno might be able to tell us that. But I know my thoughts on that. Wouter, I'll let you speak first.
Thank you, Nigel. Yeah, I was reading it as well, and I was a bit concerned about reading that. The question is, what are they offering as a test? What are they going to do? And why are they doing it? And so next thing is, what are they doing? What will they be doing with the data they've collected? So there are several questions that remain unanswered. And so if I was a school, if I was a principal of a school, I really don't like to say yes to these kind of things, because we don't know what is going to happen with this testing. And so it depends on what is offered here. For example, I mentioned the Sportfolio. That is also a private company that has developed this tool. But the tool is, you can just buy the tool and you can start using it. And it's not really a testing thing. It's a guide to guide students in their learning process. So that's quite a different thing than really private company that offers testing in a school. And again, then we end up at the beginning of our talk, where we were saying that it's just not healthy, or it's even dangerous to organize testing out of the blue. It can be dangerous for pupils, whether it's a private company or the PE teacher himself or anyone else who is doing this without any preparation. Yeah, we end up in the same conclusion.
Biljana, I think you're wanting us to wind up here at some stage. So in answer to Bruno's suggestion to the French companies, I would politely tell them to go away and leave the assessment of children to the teachers to help enhance their development through physical education. And also, I just want to pick up Dave again has popped something into the chat. And, you know, the real focus on students' holistic development and using best practices to do that is the way we can maximize our support for individuals and help them make progress. And what we're looking at is to try and help individuals become lifelong addicts to physical activity. And if we test them in fitness situations, we're going to lose them. But if we find a way to support them and encourage them through sensitive assessment processes that are developmental and progressive, then we're more likely to keep them and encourage them.
Thank you, Nigel, and definitely interesting comment and from side of David, which one we can all agree. Yes, Viviana, there is something more?
Yes, there is from Ireland. There is a clear circular in Ireland from the Department of Education that regarding the use of physical testing in physical education. She provided the link, so if someone is interested in the presentation.
Yes, thank you very much, Viviana. So I think in terms of time now, we can go to the final thoughts and final conclusions from the side of Nigel and Wouter. And I could agree just that we open up a lot of interesting topics that we can discuss further on the EUPEA forums. But you're all also welcome to share your thoughts and maybe your concerns and your ideas. So what's the next that we can discuss on this topic? So Nigel and Wouter, what would be your final conclusions and maybe final thoughts or suggestions or recommendations regarding this topic?
The final thought is please bear in mind the holistic approach using assessment and focus on the progression and development of children, because that is the most important thing in where we should use assessment for.
Thank you. And I cannot agree more with this. So Nigel?
Yeah, I think I shared mine in my last comments to Bruno. Tell the French testers to go away and focus on holistic, supportive assessment, reflection, opportunities, journals, things like that encourage the children to have a positive reflection on what they're doing in physical education.
Thank you very much. And I think that we all agree about the holistic approach and the importance of holistic development within physical education, which also came like a conclusion from this discussion that we have. So at this point, I would like to take thanks first to Nigel and Wouter for their expertise and for sharing their ideas, and also open up a lot of different questions that we might discuss and think about in future. I would also like to thank to Viviana and Bruno for their technical support and for following up the comments and keep in touch with all the people that are present here on our webinar. And the main thanks goes to all our colleagues and friends that spend their time here to share their ideas and to be part of this PE talk. I would just like to remind you all to follow the EUPEA, the work that EUPEA is doing, and also the social media, because there we share a lot of practice and experiences, but also raise a lot of questions, which questions are going to be answered in some of the next or future PE talks. So thank you everyone for your time and for your effort, and see you on the next PE talk and also on the next event of EUPEA, which is the forum in Belgrade, and also we have many other events that you can follow on our website. Thank you once again.